In the previous episode, we looked into why are GPT models so powerful. We looked into what is the potential future of these GPT models, and we explored why prompt engineering is so important, etc. In this part, we are going to look into the partnership between OpenAI and Microsoft. And we are going to look into how can you get access to these OpenAI models? Is it only available in Azure or can you get it in any other platforms as well? Enjoy.
What I'm going to talk about now is let's get down into the practical. So now you kind of have a bit of a basis on how these LLMs or these frontier models, foundational models are built, how they kind of work, and how you get access to them. But how do you get access to them in a practical sense? How do you build them into your own applications, your own solutions, or whatever you're doing? So obviously, Microsoft and OpenAI have been partners for quite some time, many years before the announcement of ChatGPT. Microsoft and OpenAI have been working closely together. Microsoft built the infrastructure in Azure to help OpenAI train these large language models that we're so used to these days. So we have a partnership with OpenAI, and that enables Microsoft to provide the OpenAI models inside Azure. Now, they are the same models, the same neural networks, the same model weights that are trained by OpenAI, but they are actually hosted on GPUs that Microsoft manages ourselves directly. So you can get access to the exact same models, ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, ChatGPT GPT-4 Turbo, etc., but via Azure. And this is provided inside the Azure OpenAI service. So that service allows you to use or get access to the core models like GPT-4 and GPT-4 Turbo and 3.5 Turbo, which are all language-based models. It also gives you access to what we call multimodal models. Now, these are models that can take input of different types, such as images, audio, text, video, and then produce output of the same. And this includes GPT-4o and GPT-4 Turbo with vision. Um, those are what we call multimodal models. We also, in Azure OpenAI service, allow you to fine tune some of the models, not all models, but some of the models with your own data. Now, fine tuning is a process where you take a set of question and answer pairs, basically, literally a CSV file that says, if I ask this question, this is how I want you to answer. And that allows you to tweak or fine tune the model to behave in a certain way. It's important to understand this isn't a reliable way of getting information into the model. It is a useful tool that can help you change the model's behavior and use certain terms, prefer certain terms or ways of describing things over others. But we won't go into too much detail, but Azure OpenAI does allow you to do that. There is also, of course, access to the DALL-E 3 model. Now, this is a diffusion model. It is a generative model that creates images from text. And if you've used tools like if you've used the copilot.microsoft.com and asked it to generate an image, behind the scenes, it's calling DALL-E 3. And finally, there is also the transcription and translation models. And these are what we call text to speech or speech to text. And there is Whisper and TTS provided through those.
So Daniel, a quick question on like if anybody or customers or anybody try to access these models of OpenAI, can they get in any platform or is it only available in Azure?
So, great question. The OpenAI models are only available in two ways. You can get them direct through OpenAI, or you can get them through Azure. They aren't available anywhere else. That said, even if you had a service or an application that was sitting somewhere else in some other cloud platform, because the service is provided as an API endpoint, you can still access it. So although it's in Azure, and you will obviously, if the rest of your application that is using Azure OpenAI is in Azure, you get to do more secure. You get to put VNets around things and other pieces of security, but you're not excluded from using it. But when you are using the model provided by Microsoft in Azure, it lives in Azure and the API endpoint is in Azure. And there's no other way to get the OpenAI models.
Awesome. So we will probably cover that part in a future episode where we'll talk about responsible AI and putting controls around Azure,
Yeah,
AI, etc.
absolutely. And security and is paramount, especially if you are using these models to, look at data that might be considered private or sensitive, or your business data. You want to keep that secure, and you want to make sure that you are wrapping that with as much security as you require. But these are what we call the models.
Right.
They're just an API call away. You
Yeah.
can just make an API call. But there is also higher level abstractions that are provided by these models. Now, they're not the models themselves. You can think of them as extensions or tools that are using the models on your behalf to make your life easier. And these are along the bottom. The first one, and I think we will definitely talk about this in a future episode, is on your data. So this is where you want to bring your own private data, whatever that is, to the model and make that available for them as grounding data to the model. So if I had, all my HR documentation, and I might want to create an HR chatbot that is able to answer questions about my HR data, what I could do is I can use the on your data extensibility of Azure OpenAI service to provide that and do all the work of breaking down those documents, making them indexable, and then using them with Azure OpenAI. The second thing is Azure AI Studio. Now, this is as we are seeing more and more organizations adopt AI at scale and build their own AI solutions. We're seeing the need for AI solutions to be continuously delivered and evaluated at scale. Azure AI Studio is what we call an LLM ops platform, a large language model ops platform that helps you build, evaluate, test, secure, and ensure you're meeting all your responsible AI obligations all in one place at scale. And this is becoming more and more important. And finally, we'll talk about Assistance API. So we often see these large language model solutions or solutions using large language models, they require additional machinery. We talked about the ability to store memories and retrieve them, or potentially run code or generate images. All of these are or call tools. All of these are features of what we call the Assistance API. It's a higher level abstraction or a set of a an ability, a set of APIs that you can call to do more have the models do more on your behalf. You can still do this yourself. You could still create all the code to do what Assistance API does, but this just makes it a little bit easier in these more advanced scenarios. And the final differentiating factor here is provision throughput. Often you want, when you're using a generative AI model, these are large models running on GPUs in Azure regions around the world. They are a limited GPUs are of course a finite resource. And what you're often wanting to do is say, I want to have a chunk dedicated just to me so that I know when I hit this model, I'm going to get the most predictable latency on the response. That is something called provision throughput. Otherwise, you are using what we call pay as you go throughput, which is basically first and first served. You make your request and the request will be processed, but it won't be as predictable in latency. And sometimes that matters to organizations.